What's up, YouTube? Pink Reaper here, back with yet another video on the Gen 6 metagame, and just like before, I have a couple replays that I'll have just playing in the background so you have something to watch while I'm kind of rambling on here in the background. You'll excuse me if I sound a little off. My throat is kind of not feeling too well. I think I'm getting sick. So I'm going to be a little bit quieter than normal. I'm not going to be yelling at the top of my lungs, trying to keep my throat feeling a little better. And like I said, in this particular video, I'm going to be talking about the, or I don't know if I said it, but at the very least, I posted it in my, with my last video. I'm going to be talking about the changes to the actual metagame, where the metagame is moving, things like that. This is OU only, mind you, and it's going to mostly be post-bank, since post-bank will be starting very soon. There won't really be a pre-bank metagame for much longer. So let's just jump right into it. Let's get this going. So first and foremost, let's talk about the big one that is the new typing, and that is fairy type. I've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it now. I'm going to go a little bit more in-depth into it, and honestly, I don't feel like fairy types are all that great. They're not. No, that's not what I want to say. I feel like the current fairy types, the fairy types that we have as of right now, aren't that good. The main reason for this is I just feel like most of our current fairy types aren't that strong. There are some good ones, don't get me wrong. I feel like Togekiss is really, really good. It'll definitely jump to OU in this generation. It might have been OU last generation. I don't remember if it fell or not. It was definitely OU in Gen 4, and it's definitely going to be one of the higher tier fairies. But as most fairies sort of lean on the specially defensive side, if you go to Bulbapedia, they have this great little chart. They have these great little charts that show you the overall base stats of basically every Pokemon of any given type. And if you look at fairies, they're very specially leaning. They have higher special attack and they have higher special defense. The problem with that is that there's so many physical dragon types that can still take care of them, that fairy typing isn't quite the absolute anti-dragon type that a lot of people might think it will be. They are still very good against dragons, though, don't get me wrong. A lot of dragons, their secondary stabs aren't that great, especially when dealing with fairy types. Like, that comes in with, say, Latios and Latios. The psychic typing does not really do it much help against those particular fairy types, especially since obviously they're more specially inclined. Togekiss being Togekiss basically just straight up counters the ground dragons, which there are a couple of. Oh, I want to point this out right here. In this video, I just roared myself out against an Espeon. And the entire reason was I was expecting my opponent to attack me, and I was just hoping for Heatran to eat the attack and then to switch me into something I could use against Espeon. Didn't happen. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to point that out because someone's going to point it out in the video, or I mean in the comments. But yeah, in terms of fairy versus dragon, I don't feel like the fairies we have are necessarily the greatest to deal with dragons. There's certain fairies that deal with certain dragons, but they kind of struggle with others. However, I believe the fairy typing in and of itself is in fact one of the most absurd typings in the game. I feel it is currently the second best type in the game. It doesn't hit a lot of things special. It doesn't hit a lot of things super effectively, and it doesn't necessarily hit all the best things super effectively. But it hits some very key types, most notably Dark, Dragon, and Fighting. I think it hits Fighting. If it doesn't hit Fighting super effectively, it resists Fighting. I know that much. And that's the other thing. It doesn't have a lot of resists, but the resists it does have are extremely important. It resists Fighting, it is immune to Dragon, and I want to say it resists Dark. Sorry, I really should have looked that up. I meant to do that before I started this video. I apologize. I'm going to do that right now, in fact. I was right. So yes, it resists fighting. It resists dark. It hits fighting super effectively. It hits dark super effectively. It's immune to dragon. Hits dragon super effectively. And I totally didn't even know this. It resists bug. That's a thing. The fighting and dragon is very, very important because these dragons are obviously super ubiquitous with OU. Most OU teams run at least one dragon. Some run more. And most OU teams also run a fighting type. And again, some run more. And the other thing is the big lack of weaknesses. Poison does not have... Or poison... Not poison. Fairy does not have an abusable weakness. It has steel and it has poison. Poison will never be a common attacking type, no matter what. No matter how common fairies become, it will never become a common attacking type. There are a few Pokemon that will use poison moves, mind you. There are, like things like Gengar, things like Mega Venusaur, things that have stab poison. They now have a reason to use that stab poison, but you'll never see something running unstabbed poison. It's just, even with the fairy types, it's just not worth it. Steel, you at least have Scizor. But even then, again, there's not a lot of things that run steel attacks. There's some dragons out there right now that are running steel attacks. Iron Head, Iron Tail, whatever. Not a good idea. You basically have to be running a non-choiced dragon to do that. And there's a lot of dragons that like being choiced. And there's a lot of dragons that don't have access to that type of move. To a steel type, or a poison type for that matter, to deal with fairy types. And there's just not a lot of good steel or poison type moves to take advantage of. And because of that, a lot of fairy types are sitting on basically no real weaknesses. One of the ones that really jumps out at me is Clefable becoming a mono fairy type. Cosmic Power Clefable is an absolute monster. It's terrifying. Very few things can get past Cosmic Wall Clefable after it's set up a few times, because there's just not a lot of strong steel type attacks to get through a +1, +2 defense Clefable, let alone if it manages to get higher than that. It's completely immune to passive damage because of its ability. The only real thing you can do is phase it out, and it has access to stuff like Charge Beam and Stored Power to make it, strong. If it Charge Beams itself to +6, you basically lost. If you're up against a +6/+6 Clefable, you lose. That's just kind of how it's going to go. Even if you have something that resists it, even if Clefable has a very difficult time killing what's ever out, I can promise you whatever you have out is probably not going to kill Clefable. Especially since even if you get that critical hit, it probably has enough defense to withstand whatever you throw at it. Now, the other fairy types, there aren't really that many other mono fairy types, especially none that are really that great. There are some that have very, very, very heavily taken advantage of it. I recently learned Whimsicott is now a grass fairy type Pokemon, which is absurd. That Pokemon was already insanely annoying. Now it has an immunity it can switch in on, and a ton of resistances. Useful resistances. Dark, ground, dragon, obviously, with the immunity, water, all these things it can just easily switch in on and just do whatever it wants to do because it's a prankster annoyance. We are currently lucky there's not a lot of things to take advantage of fairy typing the way it is. I feel moving forward, if more Pokemon are introduced, if there are more mono fairies introduced, if there's more good mono fairies introduced, it's going to be extremely dangerous. Just take a look at Xerneas in Ubers, for those of you who haven't seen it. For those who don't know, Xerneas in Ubers is basically the best Uber in the game. I think it's got something like 80% usage, because what are you going to use against this monster that just has huge attacking stats, great defenses, and a typing that you just can't really deal with? It's absurd. Mono Fairy is, without question, in my opinion, I take it back. Okay. I was about to say without question the best type. I'm like, wait a minute, no, that's not what I want to say. I want to say, in my opinion, it is the second best type. The best type, and that's what I want to talk about next, is Ghost. Now, that might strike you as weird, but hold on for a second, because I'm going to be talking about Ghost, and I'm going to be talking about Steel types right now. Steel types have moved down quite a bit in defensive merit, because they've lost two really useful defensive typings, that is Ghost and Steel, but Ghost has moved to the absolute top of attacking types, because as of right now, there's one thing that resists Ghost, and that's Dark types. And Dark is trash defensively. Nothing wants to use Dark as a defensive typing. What with that whole massive fighting weakness and all. But, because of the drop-ins, obviously because of the Steel nerf, and because there's so few things that resist it, and because it's so easy to, cover the one immunity, the one thing that's immune to Ghost. Fighting type attacks on Ghost type Pokemon covers your one resistance and your one weakness. You are now perfectly covered. There's nothing to stop that the Ghost the Ghost fighting type combination. And while before it wasn't a big deal because there weren't any really massively powerful Ghost types to take advantage of that, we now have one in Aegislash with his 150 base attacking stats and Ghost typing. What switches in well to that? Let's be honest. Nothing. Because nothing can take a hit from from Aegislash, because nothing resists Aegislash. I feel like a Steel nerf was necessary, but I don't agree with giving Ghost basically nothing. Like, nothing. You should have given Ghost another resistance. And to that end, going back to Fairy type, I feel like Fairy should have also had another weakness. I think Fairy should be Fire weak. I know that a lot of Dragon types already use Fire type attacks. I'm sorry. But you've got a Pokemon that's, that its attack type is resisted by Fire types, and it doesn't really have any useful weaknesses to take advantage of. It has no real, usable weaknesses. You should have given it a Fire weakness. To that end, I feel like Ghost should be sitting on either another weakness or an additional weakness or something else resisting it. Because Ghost only has two weaknesses. It has Dark and it has Ghost. And it only has one type that, like I said, it only has one type that resists it and one type that's immune to it. It's far, far too good currently. It is so far beyond all the attacking types in the game. And you might say, well, what about Dragon? Only one thing resists Dragon and only one thing's immune to Dragon. Yeah, but those things are common. That's the thing. Normal types basically don't exist in Gen 6. There's almost no normal types that are used. The only normal types that are really used are Chansey and Blissey. And beyond that, you can't really use Dark as a defensive type, because even if you have a defensive Dark type that you could, hope to use against a Ghost type, you're going to just get absolutely demolished by, all of the fighting types that are out there. And this is a big thing. This is why the metagame is basically centering itself around Aegislash. I don't feel like Aegislash as a Pokemon is broken. I feel like the fact that they removed anything that legitimately resists Ghost is broken. That is the problem currently. Beyond that, obviously, Steels are now becoming less and less common because of the Steel nerf. There's still a couple common Steel types, but you're not seeing as many. And that's simultaneously good and bad. It's good because obviously Steels were kind of like the thing. Everything had to play around Steels, and now you have more options. You don't have to worry about it. You can use stuff like Grass type attackers and not have to worry about LOL Steel. But there's the other side where now there's not as many good checks for certain really, really powerful attackers. And And it kind of all just comes back again to you having lost out on Ghost and, to a lesser extent, Dark resistances. There's a lot less things to counter Ghost and Dark type attacks. Which moves us to our next... I don't know what I want to call this. Well, it moves me to my next thing. The new moves that are becoming sort of like the meta. Not two new moves, but two moves that have just sort of taken off. They've become extremely popular, extremely common. And those are, starting off, Knockoff. For those who don't know, Knockoff in Generation 6... oh shoot, I need another replay. Well, I'll get one in a second. Knockoff in Generation 6, it has 65 base power now. It's been buffed quite a bit in power. And when it knocks an item off of the opponent, it increases its attacking power by 1.5, knocking it up to like 97.5, which rounds down. For those of you who don't know, in Pokemon, if you have a half, if you have a decimal, anything, it always rounds down. At least that's how it was. I don't know if it still does, Gen 6, whatever. Because of that, Knockoff is now an extremely useful move, because one, it's very powerful now. You've got almost a base 100 power Dark-type move, and knocking off items is always, always, always very good. I always thought Knockoff was kind of underutilized in earlier generations because of how ridiculously powerful, getting rid of an opponent's item was. Like, imagine Chansey without Eviolite. Imagine, or Eviolite. Imagine Keldeo without Choice Specs. It's actually still very powerful in the range. Gen 5 was stupid. But these Pokemon lose huge advantages, and now that it's been buffed in power and everyone's using it, it's extremely, extremely powerful. We're kind of lucky that Mega items can't be knocked off, so at least you have a good switch into it, but Knockoff has become very prevalent. There's a lot of things that are using it. Scissors especially have been using it, Mega Scizor or just even non-Mega Scizor, along with Thief, which also got buffed to 60 power. There's stuff like Knockoff, what's that thing's name? It's a 5th gen Pokemon, I can't remember its name. God, what is it? It's that stupid defensive bird type Pokemon. I'll look it up later. I will put it in annotations on this part of the video if I have to. It's a dark flying type, whatever. Expect to be seeing a lot more of that in Gen 6. It's going to become a very common move because it's powerful. There aren't as many things that resist it anymore. Dark is resisted by Fairy, Dark, and Bug and Fighting. Fairy, Dark, Bug and Fighting. And only, and there are a couple of those are common, but they're not nearly as common as some other defensive typings, and even fairy types, even fighting types, they hate losing their items. Everything hates losing their items. There's no Pokemon that works better without an item than with an item, minus acrobatics, flying gem Pokemon, but that's kind of it. Or unburdened Pokemon, I guess. Those are that's it. And then the other one is Willow Wisp, and before I start on that, I'm going to get you guys another video to watch. Right, so let's talk about Willow Wisp. The reason Willow Wisp has become so common in Generation 6 is because of an increase in accuracy. Willow Wisp is now at 85 accuracy, it used to be at 75 accuracy. The other reason is some of the most common Pokemon in Generation 6, Rotom Wash, Trevenant, and Gourgeist all get Willow Wisp, along with some other Pokemon that can utilize it pretty well, like Heatran or Talonflame. Because of this, you will see a lot of Willow Wisp. And because of that, the metagame is sort of shifting away from physical attacks. Not, completely away from it, but you'll see a lot more special attackers than you would have seen in, previous gens when fighting was so common. When fighting types and physical attacking was so common. You'll also see You'll also see more clerics than you used to see. Heal Bell, Aromatherapy. These weren't super common in previous generations. Oh, hey, look, there's that Pokemon whose name I couldn't remember. Um, you didn't really see clerics in Generation 4 or Generation 5. They existed. There was Heal Bell, there was Aromatherapy, but it wasn't nearly as common as you'll be seeing it here in Generation 6, because again, there is going to be it's going to be very common to see Willow Wisp. And I know I didn't put too much time into this move, but I want to move to my next thing because it kind of plays off of Willow Wisp. Because of, the steel nerf, because of how frequent the use of Willow Wisp is and stuff like that, because of, the fact that Ghost is basically unresisted, the metagame has been shifting quite quickly towards a more bulky, offensive metagame. What I mean is there's a lot less choice, choice Scarfers, choice Banders. There's at least a couple choice Specs Pokemon still, but there's a lot less frail, mixed sweepers and stuff like that. And instead we're moving towards a metagame with bulky attackers that can take a hit and hit back. Because you need Pokemon that can, that can take a burn. You need Pokemon that can take a hit, that can live through this stuff. With choice Scarfers and choice Banders, if you get burned, you've pretty much lost that Pokemon. That Pokemon is worthless. But with bulky attackers, you have stuff like Taunt Gyarados that won't get itself burned. You have more bulky special attackers like Latios, Calm Mind Latios, and things like that. And because of this, like I said, you're not going to be seeing the frail, fast type Pokemon. By the way, this replay that you're watching is very boring. I just picked it because it's a lot of turns. I'm sorry. But you're going to be seeing a lot more setup sweepers as well. Things like bulky Dragon Dancers, things like Swords Dance sets, and things like that. You're going to be seeing a lot less of stuff like Swords Dance Breloom, because it just doesn't work anymore. Although Breloom does have Swords Dance Life Orb Breloom, I should say, since I guess Toxic Heal or Poison Heal Toxic Orb Breloom can at least get around the burn thing. But I just throw out Willow Wisp a lot and just hit whatever comes in. And a couple times that's been Breloom, even if it had a Toxic Orb, and at that point that Pokemon's just done. And this moves into my next point, is the prevalence of priority in Gen 6. Now this is the biggest thing I really feel in terms of how offense in Gen 6 works. You have bulky Pokemon now that either need to set up with Dragon Dance to help their speed, or they need priority, and that's a big thing in Gen 6. Because Shadow Sneak, Aegislash, because whatever it's Gale Wings, Talonflame, I actually couldn't remember the name of that ability, because of stuff like Mega Scizor, because of Mega Lucario, who have priority, because of Mega Kangaskhan that has Sucker Punch, because of Mega Mawile that has Sucker Punch, because of these things, you're basically going to see priority on every single team. Oh yeah, and Aqua Jet Azumarill, I'm sorry. I didn't really talk about Azumarill. I'm going to talk about older Pokemon later, even though I was talking about fairy types earlier. The big thing really nowadays is going to be setup sweepers that set up some sort of priority and just sort of sweep with that. They ignore speed and they just go for that. And that sort of plays in more, again, with the bulky offensive thing. Well, now that everything's using, +2 weak attacks rather than, +1 or +0 really, really strong attacks, you can get in something that's bulky, take that hit, and just sort of retaliate. And that's what we're moving towards. You're not going to see walls as much. There's not going to be really, Skarmbliss, even though I'm playing against that right now. Because Skarmbliss can't really deal with bulky attackers. What is Skarmbliss going to do? Do you really think something like Aegislash is afraid of Toxic or Thunderwave? Um, we're moving more towards a time when stuff is going to be in the probably 80 to 100 speed tier, maybe even slower. It might be 70 to 90 is extremely common. And the things you'll have to outspeed will have to be plus 170 to 100 speed Pokemon. And there will be a lot of stuff just throwing out really powerful priority moves. I've since stopped using Choice Band Scizor since this video and moved on to Swords Dance Scizor because it can take hits. There's not a lot of things running Life Orb either. That's another big thing. Because you're running a lot more bulky Pokemon, you're not going to see max attack, max speed, 0 defense Gyarados anymore running a Life Orb. You're going to be seeing bulky Gyarados using leftovers. You're going to be seeing a lot of bulky Pokemon, bulky attackers using leftovers. Heatran will not be running Choice Scarf or Choice Specs. It's going to be running leftovers. You might even see a lot of like leftovers, say leftovers Azumarill. Yeah, Choice Band is really good, but Choice Band Azumarill is pretty easy to counter. But, bulky leftovers Azumarill, not as easy to counter, especially because of that typing, giving it quite a few useful resistances. As you can see here, I'm running Terrakion on this particular team. I've been heavily considering just getting rid of Choice Scarf and going towards, Swords Dance on it, because at 108 speed, there's not a lot of really common things that are going to be outspeeding that Terrakion. There's a few really common Scarfed Pokemon in Gen 6, but there's not nearly as many as there were in earlier generations. I'm not seeing a lot of Choice Scarf Latios or Latias. I'm not seeing a lot of, there's no real Choice Scarf Keldeo. It can't take advantage of rain like it did before. There's no Chlorophyll Venusaur or anything like that. So you're seeing a lot less Choice Scarf. And those Pokemon move, away from choice items and they start moving towards bulk. I have no problem with this, mind you. It just means that the metagame is not going to be the same as it was before. Gen 6 is going to be its own monster. There's things you can only do in Gen 6. There's moves you basically have to have in Gen 6 that don't really, weren't as good in previous gens. Taunt, I feel like, is going to be a huge move in Generation 6 for things that can use it. Because there are so many Pokemon, they want to Defog, they want to Willow Wisp, they want to Leech Seed. There's so much of this, and there's so many things that want to set up. This is really important. Taunting an SD Talonflame or an SD Aegislash, or taunting a Defogger, taunting a Spiker, taunting something like Trevenant. This is really powerful. These Pokemon don't really have strong options outside of that. Heck, I'm running a really weird Gyarados that's made to beat other Gyarados that try and set up, because I want to be able to taunt those Gyarados when they try and Dragon Dance against my Gyarados. That's just sort of where the metagame is moving. I don't have a problem with that. I like the metagame. Honestly, I like a more bulky, kind of like less absurd, you just got hit KO'd by something that you resisted anyway because lol, Choice Specs Hydro Pump in the rain from Keldeo. But that's sort of it. That's sort of the nitty-gritty for the new not the new metagame, but like where the metagame is shifting currently towards in Generation 6. I'm not going to talk about Mandibuzz. That's the name. Sorry. I'm not going to start talking about over centralization or stuff like that. Like if I feel certain Pokemon are going to be, the only thing, because keep in mind the metagame develops. In Generation 4 there was a time when every team basically had lead Gengar. That's what I need you to understand this. Lead Choice Scarf Hypnosis Gengar. That was a thing. That was the thing. That was the most common thing in Generation 4 for a very long time as a lead. I'm not saying it's good. I don't think it was good. I took advantage of it hard when that was a thing. But this is something you need to understand. Sometimes things are really, really popular, and you have to be able to deal with those really, really popular things. And eventually, they stop getting used as much just because, everyone's dealing with them, everyone's ready for them, they're just not as popular anymore. Suicide leads in Generation 4 were kind of in the same thing. There was a time when everyone was using Aerodactyl as their lead. Aerodactyl or, what was that little... Azelf. But eventually people realized, hey, rather than doing that, we can just throw out something like Hippowdon or Swampert. Swampert got really popular. Or Metagross, where even if you taunt us, that just gives us a free turn to hit you, and we'll be alive later, and we can set up Stealth Rocks in a couple turns. Eventually the metagame shifts. So, as we are right now, I'm not going to talk about over-centralization or anything like that, but I will say the way things are and the way we're going, we're going to be moving towards a more bulky offensive game type. And this is because, Steel nerf, this is because of Fairy typing, this is because of Willow Wisp, this is because of Priority, this is just why. These things are all happening at the same time, and it's shifting us towards this. That's basically what I'm saying. This video is already going on for kind of long. I apologize, my throat is killing me. I can't really go on much longer. There's a couple other things I wanted to talk about, but they're not super, super important. There were items, things like that, but I guess maybe I'll just do items as their own video with the new items and stuff like that. The next video I make, I will try and make it tomorrow, assuming my voice is okay. I'm going to be finally talking about the Mega Pokemon. I didn't want to talk about them in the when I was, in the Gen 6 Pokemon overview, because they're sort of their own beast. They're off in their own little corner, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So we'll be doing that in the next video. But thanks for watching, guys. This has been Pink Reaper signing out.